All right, this is another video that focuses on another aspect of the First Amendment, and that's the part of the First Amendment that regulates free speech or permits free speech, which is obviously a right that is near and dear to sort of like the American way of life. It's the idea of free speech. So it's important to note that the First Amendment sort of like protection of freedom of speech really protects two different types of speech. The first type of speech that is protected is what we call pure speech. That's what I'm doing right now. It's like speaking. So obviously you have the right to voice your disagreement with the government and to say that you don't like what the government's doing. Like you're actually speaking. Whether that's through like spoken form or even like written form, like press, right? That's obviously like the words that are protected. That's like the pure speech stuff. The First Amendment also protects like symbolic speech, which is like non-spoken expression. So flag burning is a great example. A lot of people disagree with the practice, but the Supreme Court protects it as protected speech. When you burn a flag, you're exercising your free speech. Even though you're not saying something, it's like a demonstration. It's expression of your thoughts through action. So that's like symbolic speech, or like wearing a T-shirt or something else. That would be symbolic speech. So those are the two different types of speech. So in terms of speech, like what isn't protected, right? Any words that incite violence are not protected, right? So you could say, I disagree with that politician, but if you advocate violence against them, that's not protected speech. Obscenities are not protected. So this is not easy because what is obscene to one person is not obscene to another. But by its truest definition, obscene materials are not protected by the First Amendment. But the problem is that like it's an arbitrary definition of what obscenity is. And then libel and slander are not protected. Libel is intentionally false and hurtful information that is written against somebody else. Like you know it's false and it's intentionally trying to hurt somebody. That's the written form. Slander is the exact same thing, but it's like the spoken form. Like you know what you're saying is false, and you're intentionally saying that false information to hurt somebody's character or their standing or something like that. Problem is, both of those things are very hard to prove in a court of law that you knew something was false when you either wrote it or said it. But these are things that are not protected under the First Amendment's like guidelines on free speech. And then what are the restrictions primarily on the government's ability to limit free speech besides what we've already talked about? Um, Something called prior restraint is when like the government prevents speech from occurring, either in spoken or written form. This is almost never tolerated by the courts. In order for the government to prevent somebody from saying something ahead of time or for writing something ahead of time, there would have to be an incredible burden on the government to prove that there was a really good reason to prevent like that speech from taking place. More often than not, the person's allowed to write or say what they want, and then if there are problems, they can be dealt with in the court of law. It would be only the most special circumstances where the government would be able to stop somebody from saying something or writing something ahead of it actually being said or like published. And that's called prior restraint. If the courts would allow that, restraining somebody from saying something ahead of time, and again, it's a really rare circumstance. It would have to be the most special circumstance for a court to allow the government to prevent speech from happening before it actually occurs.